Okay, so I had to do a really big, fat double take before moving on from this. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's not something we can just move on from. We got to talk about this. So today we're going over one of the most interesting, probably the weirdest, and one of the more unique contract extensions we might have ever seen in the NHL. Because today we are heading over to the Anaheim Ducks. Yeah, that's right, things are getting spicy down in Disney. Because it is Frank Vatrano who is extended with Anaheim on a 3-year contract worth $4.57 million a year. However, if you go out there and you read the report as to what the dollar amount is, it's not just $4.57 million a year for 3 years. You do the math. 457 times 3, that's 13 million something. That's not necessarily what it is. Frank Vatrano has a 3-year, $18 million extension. And it's interesting here, as Pierre LeBrun points out, because Frank Vatrano will get paid $3 million a year in base salary, but then make $9 million in deferred salary. Starting 10 years from now, in 2035, he'll make $900,000 a year for 10 years, and his plan is to live outside of California and its tax system at that point in his retirement. The Ducks, meanwhile, benefit with deferred payments by having $4.57 million AAV on the deal. It's a creative way for both the team and the player to make it work, and perhaps show other players in the future a way to stick handle around California's tax issue. And this is so interesting. For those simpleton folks like me who don't really understand the way the National Hockey League system works, I'll try to explain this in my own words here. The contract is $18 million. And it goes on for 3 years, so normally it would be $6 million AAV. But instead of getting paid $18 million over the next 3 years, he will get paid half of that, $9 million. So a base salary of $3 million a year. Now, I have zero idea, and this is like the biggest question that I have. How do you get $3 million a year to $4.57 million AAV? I get that there's $9 million of the contract that he's not going to be paid within the next 3 years, and that he'll be starting to get paid that money 10 years from now in 2035. That's so intriguing to me how this entire thing can work itself out, but essentially, Frank Vatrano is going to be playing hockey from 2025 all the way to 2028, getting paid $3 million a year in the process, but he will also make the remainder of that money starting in 2035. 10 years long, $900,000 a year till 2045. Like, imagine Frank Vatrano being on the Ducks payroll in 2042 for playing hockey in 2025. That's ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to go out there and say tax evasion or anything, or I'm not going to start talking about, like, the value of money 10, 20 years from now. I mean, California, obviously, we're not going to get into state tax or anything like that, but it's pretty big in California. And deferred salary payments certainly does seem like a way to navigate around that. Because if Frank Vatrano is saying to the Anaheim Ducks, yeah, I want to get this money that I'm going to be making for playing hockey in the next 3 years. I want to get this money 10 years later, because 10 years later I'm going to be retired, I'm not going to be here anymore, and I want to get that money put into my account around the California state tax laws, because I'm going to be earning it then, even though the work that I'm doing to get that money is going to be from now until 2028. So by 2044, I'm still going to be making money. Like, what? That is so bizarre. And I actually needed to go out there and dive into it more, so what I went to was the R-Hockey subreddit, where the Vatrano contract was posted and discussed. Stick in Rink asked, Pierre LeBrun explained it, but I'm even more confused. I don't understand how this lowers the cap hit. It's still compensation paid to the player, so why is it not calculated as part of the salary cap system? Salaries are supposed to be half of hockey-related revenue. Why isn't this considered cap circumvention? And then you had Puckpedia. Yeah, that's right, the Puckpedia guys themselves that responded on Reddit. This has been part of the CBA for a while, but teams have, for the most part, started using it in the past year. We have a pretty article that breaks down the details on how it works, as well as a deferred salary calculator, where you can play around with it yourself, although the Vatrano deal is set up in a way that the calculator can't perfectly do yet, but you can get close. This is a rough breakdown of how the contract is structured, with the exception of the contract being paid out $900,000 a year for 10 years instead of receiving the yearly deferral in one lump sum. The too long didn't read is that it's not considered cap circumvention because Vatrano is making arguably less, where $900,000 will be worth less in 2035 than if he got it on July 1st, 2025. The CBA has an interest rate set that defines what a dollar deferred today would be worth in the future, and that rate will reduce the cap hit. And so essentially, because in the NHL's mind, $900,000 is going to be worth less in 2035, which is when he'll be getting those yearly payments, because it's going to be worth less, there's an interest rate percentage that says, okay, because it's going to be worth less then, the cap hit now is lower. Essentially, that's what I think it means, and if you go over to the screenshot that Puckpedia provided, the total contract value, $18 million, the contract length is 3 years, so that's how long Vatrano is going to be playing for Anaheim on this deal. Normally, it would be seen as $6 million. Okay, great. But instead of being paid $6 million a year, he's going to be paid $3 million a year. So each of the 3 years, he'll only be paid $3 million in a base salary, which means that $9 million will be deferred over to later, and then the cap savings, because the interest rate is 5.39 and the total comparable money that's going to be deferred is $9 million, you're going to get a $4.5 million AAV. Which means that the Ducks are saving $1.4 million in savings per year, and they're going to be walking away happy because Frank Vatrano is a good player for them that has signed on technically for cheaper than $6 million AAV on their cap hit. Even though he's going to be making the money anyway, it's just kind of bizarre to see this be played out the way it is. I mean, we've spent 7 freaking minutes in this video talking about the guy's contract and the dollars attached to it. When do we go out there and do this? This never happens. And I think for Frank Vatrano, this is the most interesting situation you could have imagined because he's playing pretty well. Like, he had a really great season last year. This season, he's on pace for fewer points, but still, Frank Vatrano has been a solid player for the Anaheim Ducks the past little while here. So him sticking around in Anaheim, obviously that's great. It's just Anaheim and California, they tax these expensive people, athletes, and more super highly. So in an effort to get around the tax system that the state of California presents, I'm guessing Frank Vatrano and his agent just went out there and did something that might start a trend in the National Hockey League now. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section as to whether or not this is going to happen again. I think it was Seth Jarvis who had deferred salary on his contract extension as well, but not to this magnitude. Not where it's like, yeah, we're going to give you half the money now on the regular contract during your playing time, and then we're going to give you half the contract 10 years from now, over the next 10 years after that. So by 2037, 2038, 2039, you're going to be making $900,000 a year for doing nothing. Actually, not for doing nothing, for playing hockey in 2025. Obviously, the player is good. Obviously, it's good that the player is staying in Anaheim. Obviously, the Ducks are happy to have him. Obviously, the fans are happy too. Everybody's happy. It's just, this contract is so weird. And I don't know, I just hope that Frank Vatrano and his agent and the NHL and the Ducks, they all have pretty good accountants to go out there and make sure that everything is done properly, because the last thing we want to be hit with is the news that Frank Vatrano is going to be hit with some sort of tax evasion fraud charge from wherever it is because of this contract that he's going to be making $900,000 a year for 10 years, starting 10 years later for playing hockey now. Like, normally you get work, you do work, and then you get paid for that work. It's so rare to see a player or somebody or anybody do work and be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to get paid 10 years in the future. How about that? Can I get that money 10 years later? That's so interesting to me. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this contract extension handed out to Frank Vatrano and whether or not you think it's tax evasion. That's like the big question everybody's going out there and saying. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.